Tonight, exercising the ghosts of the financial crash, the Chancellor makes the case for more risk-taking in the city. Rachel Reeves will deliver her first Mansion House speech this evening and argue that excessive regulation is now stifling economic growth. Is she right? And what are the risks of letting the financial sector rip once again? We'll discuss. Also tonight, the government trumpets the arrest of an alleged small boat supplier, but admits it's not a silver bullet to tackle the migration crisis. We'll speak to the Border Security Minister. This has to be rooted out, the message from the government after a Sky News special report found evidence of abuse by paramedics in the ambulance service. Giving it some welly, Kemi Badenoch keeps the pressure on the government over what she calls its family farm tax as farmers prepare to protest outside Parliament. But what's the track record of protests actually achieving change? We'll have a look back through the archives. All that and more with James Starkey and Mike Tapp, who'll be with us for the next hour. It's Thursday, I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Do you remember back when bankers were public enemy number one? Fred the Shred, bankers' bonuses, the Wolf of Wall Street, bankers were the epitome of everything wrong with our economy and society. If you worked in a bank from 2008 to 2015, you're probably pretending at dinner parties that you worked in a more popular profession. Car salesman, maybe a journalist. That era, though, it seems, has now gone. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is making a speech tonight at Mansion House. Well, she'll say regulation went too far in the wake of the financial crash. The UK has been regulating for risk but not regulating for growth, she'll say, and the UK's status as a global financial centre can't be taken for granted. Now, financial services contribute about £170 billion to the economy, about £29 billion in taxes. That pays for an awful lot of schools and hospitals. There'll almost certainly be yelps from some. Are we really back to rewarding traders making a swift buck, betting against the economy, or taking advantage of people struggling to get a mortgage? Wasn't it a lack of regulation that got us into this mess in the first place? But right now, Rachel Reeves needs a way to fire up the economy. We all saw those anaemic growth projections at the budget. So now it's all about buttering up a banker, sweet-talking a stockbroker, politics. It goes in circles, doesn't it? Well, here is some of what the Chancellor will say this evening. She'll say while it was right that successive governments made regulatory changes after the global financial crisis to ensure that regulation kept pace with the global economy of the time, it's important that we learn the lessons of the past. These changes have resulted in a system which sought to eliminate risk-taking. That has gone too far, and in places it's had unintended consequences, which we must now address. Well, we can speak now to Sky's business and economics correspondent, Paul Kelso, who's at Mansion House in the city for us. Paul, what are we expecting to hear?
Well, we are expecting to hear from Rachel Reeves a little more detail on how she plans to strike this balance between freeing up the financial services sector to make the most of London's power as a financial services centre without sacrificing the handbrake on excessive risk. We'll get a little bit of detail, and that's pretty dry stuff and it's pretty complex. But one issue she will touch on is pay, rules around how pay has to be deferred. There's a big concerns about too much pay driving some of the risky behaviour. I think that will be a topic of conversation. We'll also hear a little more about how she plans to liberate the pension pots of Britain's public sector workers. Talked a little bit about that last night, I know, bringing together that public sector pay into big pension funds that have the scale and the freedom to invest in the infrastructure projects that she and Keir Starmer believe are crucial to delivering the growth that she badly needs to demonstrate that her fiscal plan can do. As well as Rachel Reeves, who'll be the first woman to give this Mansion House speech in history, the first as a Chancellor. Remember, it used to be a big deal when Gordon Brown would turn up at this white tie event in a lounge suit. Well, Rachel Reeves will be the first Chancellor who could give this speech and address without passing comment. I should say she is in a business suit this evening when she arrived about half an hour ago. As well as hearing from her, and it is a historic moment given her position as the first female Chancellor. We'll hear from Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England, and he has some very interesting comments, in my view, to make this evening. He's going to deliver some home truths about the economy, many of which will be welcomed by Rachel Reeves. He welcomes her moves on pensions. He talks about the inheritance when it comes to building potential growth in the economy as being poor. Well, that almost echoes precisely the language that Labour have used. He talks about problems in the labour supply chain, but most interesting, I think, the thing that will roll on from this evening, he talks about Brexit, and Andrew Bailey doesn't really do that. He avoids the subject, as did his predecessor when he could, of talking about Brexit, because he's been so politically toxic. Now, he's going to say that while he makes no gives no opinion on the rightness or otherwise of leaving the European Union, he says it has weighed on the British economy. He says the impact on trade seems to be more on goods than services. That's not particularly surprising to him, but it underlines why we must be alert to and welcome opportunities to rebuild relations while respecting the decisions of the British people. So Andrew Bailey is encouraging the government to get closer to the European Union. I understand Rachel Reeves will make good on that later in the year. She will attend the Eurozone finance ministers meeting in December. They have an open session. She'll be the first British Chancellor to do that since Brexit. So lots of words on growth from Rachel Reeves tonight, but I suspect the next front, and possibly politically as well as economically, will be turning to Europe. And all that just as a Trump presidency makes the international picture so much more complex.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. Paul Calsay there reporting outside Mansion House. Well, we will come back to that Rachel Reeves speech in a moment, but first, the Prime Minister says the arrest of a Turkish man suspected of being a supplier of small boats is a significant piece of the jigsaw in tackling Channel migrant crossings. He's suspected of supplying boats and equipment by shipping them from Turkey, storing them in Germany and then bringing them to northern France. Well, just before coming on air, I spoke to Angela Eagle, the Minister for Border Security. Thank you so much for being on the programme. It's great to speak to you today. So you're here to talk about a significant arrest. What's happened?
Well, what's happened is that someone who's at the very centre of the gang operations to smuggle people across the Channel, who supplies lots of boats and engines, has been arrested at Schiphol Airport by the Dutch police. The National Crime Agency over here provided some information, and the Belgian government want to extradite him. So he's a major player in this supply chain, and this is an example of working cross-jurisdiction operationally to try and deal with some of the gangs who are smuggling people, exploiting people and profiting on the deaths that we've had in the Channel.
And of course it's notoriously difficult to bring people like this to justice.
Because they operate across jurisdictions, they rely on people not cooperating with each other, and since we came into government we have reset our relations with our European partners. We've put more money and funding into dealing with cross-border cooperation, and this is, I hope, just the start of the effort that we're going to make.
At the same time, though, I guess I'm just struggling slightly with how much credit this government can take for it. This is a long-running investigation, by the agencies. It's not to do with you guys so much, is it?
Well, I don't particularly want to get into party political games.
You were just talking about, resetting the relationship,
yes,
putting more money in. You sounded like you were taking credit for it.
Well, I think that we can take credit for resetting our international relations and doing a lot more cross-jurisdictional cooperation. We have decided that the best focus in dealing with this issue is not the Rwanda scheme, which was a gigantic, expensive distraction, but actually to deal with smashing the gangs themselves. And to do that, you have to do basic, good operational police work cross-border, and that is what today has been about.
But I guess, this particular arrest, it seems to me, is a long-running investigation. It feels a bit like, someone does works really hard on something at work for a year, then someone new comes along, presents it to the bosses and takes all the credit for it.
Well, I think that is unfair. I think that if you look at what we've done since we got into government, we've paid a lot more attention to this. We've put more money into it. We've strengthened our presence in Europol, who were very involved in issuing this notice, which led to the arrest. We've got personal relations now much more with our colleagues and counterparts, and that is beginning to bear fruit. But as I just said, it's only the very beginning.
And I guess the numbers are the thing that matters as well, bringing the number of small boat crossings down.
And the number of deaths, which is the highest we've ever had in any year. I mean, beginning of this year, we had an 18% increase in the first 6 months of numbers coming over. We then had a quiet 3 months, and now we've had a very busy October, November. And the way we've got to tackle this is to deal with this industrialisation of smuggling that's happened in the last few years, and today's disruption and arrest is part of beginning to take that apart.
Have you been quite shocked that's taking the role by how bad the situation is?
I've been quite amazed at how sophisticated and how long-standing and how industrialised it is, and that it was allowed to get that way. I know that there are no easy answers. You've got to dismantle this kind of thing bit by bit. So no magic wands, just hard, daily police work and collaboration.
Now, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is making a speech tonight at Mansion House. I know she hasn't given the speech yet,
No.
but she's going to be talking about regulation going too far in the wake of the financial crash. The UK has been regulating for risk, but not regulating for growth. The UK's status as a global financial centre can't be taken for granted. I mean, you, of course, were in the Treasury, during the period around the financial crash. Do you think that regulation went too far?
Well, I think that after something as particular as what happened in 2008, there's bound to be a reaction. And I think that what we've seen since, and not assisted by other things that have happened, Brexit being one of them, COVID being another, is just a stalling of growth. And so the Chancellor has got to look to see what she can do in the context we're in now to kickstart a recovery in growth and investment, and I think that's what her speech is going to be about. It's
interesting, isn't it? It kind of feels to me like the sort of swashbuckling city helped the new Labour government, fund hospitals, schools, and so forth from taxation. Is that what this Labour government is hoping for as well? The city funding growth to put into public services.
Well, we have to, the city and the financial service industry actually help us grow the economy. We're a service-led economy now, and we have to recognise that. And they are in a globally competitive market. So we've got to get that sweet spot between having the right regulations so that you don't get into a dangerous situation and the swashbuckling goes too far. And we've all lived through what happens when you get to that period. But we've also got to ensure that we can remake our position as a prosperous nation in a changing global context. And I'm sure that's what the Chancellor will be talking about during her Mansion House speech tonight.
And bankers shouldn't be a dirty word anymore, I guess, then?
Well, I don't think it was ever
Well, it was a little bit, come on. It was a bit at the time.
I don't think it was a dirty word, but excess and trying to profit without thinking about the consequences of what goes wrong if you take too much risk, especially when you're putting that risk on the economy and everybody as a whole, but taking the profits yourself is the system out of kilter. And I'm sure the Chancellor tonight will be talking about how we get the right balance between being able to regrow our economy, get investment going again, so that we can fund our public services and re-establish a prosperous and growing economy.
OK, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, listening to that last bit about bankers was the former Chief Executive of the British Bankers Association, Angela Knight, who joins us now. Great to have you on the programme. So has regulation on banking gone too far, you think?
Well, the answer is yes, and hello, good evening. And I suppose, excuse me, to start to talk, and of course the minute...
That's always the way, isn't it? I'll come in with a second question if that's useful. So just explain to me why do you think it has gone too far?
I will indeed, because some of the changes that were made were quite right. There is no way in that I'm going to badmouth everything that was done. There was a lot of adjustments, a lot of modernising, a lot of really gripping what the risks were through regulation in a way that had not taken place before. But to give you a couple of examples, our banks now have to hold much more capital than any other bank in the other countries. And what you can't do is you can't hold the capital and lend it at the same time. Now, if you want growth, and we all want growth, you need to get a balance about how much you need for stability and how much you're able to lend. And as I say, it's very interesting that what we have done here in adding more and more and more requirements are some things that other countries who also had problems in the banking crisis, they have sought not to do it simply because it holds back their economy too much. So that's one. And I hope that she will also put a better coordination together between all those regulators that we've got, because we've got several of course. You know, the PRA, that's the prudential regulator, sits really with the Bank of England. Got the Financial Conduct Authority, that's separate, and that's about how you as a bank or financial service deal with your customer. And then you've got the Ombudsman, which is where complaints go to. But the Ombudsman, the rules around the Ombudsman are different to the rules around the Financial Conduct Authority.
I guess you could have making the point. You could have making the points about the sort of different regulations coming together, and also about some of the things that feel more onerous on UK banks compared to other countries. I guess the kind of counter argument to that is that we all remember what happened during the financial crash. People losing their homes, run on banks that was stopped. It was a very kind of bruising and troubling period that for many people they're still kind of recovering from. The idea of getting rid of some of that regulation feels pretty scary.
Well, you can take these arguments any way you like. I don't think anybody should walk away from the fact that we did have a very difficult time during the banking crisis, and the actions of some bankers and some banks were, quite frankly, wrong and caused this country a problem. And that's happened, of course, in many countries. I know we are bothered about what happens here, but we're also very much an international market. Now, because something was wrong then, and because actions were taken to put it right, doesn't mean that you then make rules tighter and tighter and tighter, which only have the result of constraining the economy. They don't give any more security to you or me or anybody else that might borrow money. And our financial market is about financing the economy, about financing companies. So you've got that whole piece that is all about the business finance, as well as the retail, as well as the international piece. And they need different rules to themselves. And some of those
how would you describe Labour and Rachel Reeves in particular, their relationship with banking and I guess business in general?
Well, they haven't been there long enough yet, is the answer. I mean, how long have they been in power? Only a few weeks, few months now. And this is the first major speech. And she will, from all the reports, be saying things that people want to hear. And how the Labour government will be judged on this is not what they say, but how they then set about doing and meeting their actions. What are the actions that meet the statements? So that's going to be the important judge. Yes, It is correct that this country requires a reduction in regulation in some areas, just as this country requires sorting out some of the multifarious pension funds that we've got. We can all say that. Now let's see what happens. I hope that this is going in the right direction and we get the best balance that is needed.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Great to have you on the programme today, Angela Knight. Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, joins us now. So, Rachel Reeves buttering up the bankers then?
Very much so, yes. Economic growth. Isn't it interesting? Today, November the 14th, was the day we all thought earlier in the year would be General Election Day.
That's a good point,
And, of course, all the pundits and politicians thought the same. But have we seen this week a relaunch, something of a relaunch by Keir Starmer? Because you've just been talking about the two things that Sir Keir identified earlier this week as his two key priorities: economic growth and border control and security. So, yes, buttering up the bankers, deregulation. Is all this a bit Trumpian? I mean, they're very much the Trump themes, weren't they? Border security and the economy. And so we had the unusual, shall we say, spectacle. You called the Prime Minister trumpeting that success, the breakthrough, if you like, the arrest of this key figure in the gangs. He dashed round to the Home Office. He presumably elbowed Yvette Cooper out of the way and said, no, I'm going to claim the credit for this. And, of course, made those remarks. To be fair, he did say it was only a start. But here we have Sir Keir trying to own the battle against the small boats. And at the same time, on the very same day, the Chancellor talking about economic growth. So they are really the sort of issues that Trump was talking about. Some people are suggesting that perhaps the Trump victory might turn out to be a little bit of a blessing in disguise for Labour, because they might get back to the core issues of the economy and the immigration and it tackling illegal migration. Perhaps chuck out some of that wokery, as critics would call it. But anyway, what's gone are these 5 missions. I'm not going to ask you what the Labour 5 missions were. I remember during the election campaign, it was one of those debates, I asked Ellie Reeves, what are Sir Keir's 5 missions? She really struggled. But we're down to 2 key priorities now from Sir Keir, and we've heard about them today.
There you go, really going on those 2 things, growth and immigration. John, thank you very much indeed. John Craig there, our Chief Political Correspondent. Well, the Chancellor's Mansion House speech is sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the political correspondent for Politics Joe, that's Ava Santina Evans, and the Telegraph's deputy comment editor, Annabelle Denham. Right, let's bring in our duo for the evening, shall we? The former Conservative Special Advisor James Starkey and the Labour MP for Dover and Deal, Mike Tapp. Great to have you both here. Mike, I'm going to come to you first. It's always hard, isn't it, to comment before someone's actually given a speech, but we have had these extracts through. Do you welcome what Rachel Reeves has said?
I do. Look, we made it really clear before the general election that if we're elected and we get into government, that our first priority is going to be security of the economy and growth. And that's why we delivered the budget 2 weeks ago, was it? I think it was 2 weeks ago. It does. So we delivered the budget that we did. And the fact is, we need the bankers to assist with this growth, and the growth in the economy does come from the city. So, look, we're not scrapping regulation here. I very much doubt it. That's we haven't seen the speech yet. But, whether we're dialing down on that for that growth to be enabled, I think is really positive. And I'm not an economist myself, but I do wonder whether regulation can be sort of dialed up and down when needed.
Interesting. And what do you make about it all?
Well, I think, Labour have come in with this. They bet the house on growth, I would say. It's not just growth in itself and the prosperity it will deliver for the electors, but that's where you're going to have to get the money from eventually for the NHS, because actually the increased money is only for 2 years, so they need to get growth for a whole range of reasons. Now, if you look at the budget, if you listen to business, they're all saying the budget's not going to deliver growth. So therefore, the regulatory drive that the Chancellor is looking to announce tonight, and I imagine there'll be more down the line, is going to be absolutely crucial as to whether the Labour can deliver the growth they claim they want. Because they're not going to do it through the tax system, so the only other lever they've got really is through the regulatory
I feel
system.
sometimes like I'm in like a kind of time warp when it comes to growth, because like every politician, every government says they want to pin all on growth. And obviously you can see why, because if it ticks up a few points, then look, there's a whole load of extra spending that you can do, exactly. or tax cuts you can make, or hospitals you can build. But, if it was that easy, then everyone would do it. It feels like a very risky thing to kind of bet on.
Liz Truss would still be Prime Minister.
Yeah.
I mean, look, we've inherited a really difficult economic situation with the black hole that was hidden there, and we've found ways of raising revenue to invest in our NHS, which is really important. We've got to cut those waiting lists, because the fact is, people will die that shouldn't be dying. There are avoidable deaths, occurring. So these investments are vital, and of course, education. Kids shouldn't be learning in prefabs in playgrounds. So we have managed to put a budget forward that raises that revenue. But the fact is, these are the first steps in our government, and therefore we need some radical solutions to future growth, and hopefully that's what this will deliver.
The other part of this evening that we haven't reflected on that much in the programme, but Paul Calso alluded to, was Andrew Bailey's comments on the EU, right? And that has not growth, and that we need to look at a closer relationship there. James, what would you sort of say on that?
I mean, it's very interesting, given, I think, as Paul pointed out, We've never had this before from the Governor of the Bank of England. And clearly Labour have made a big thing about a reset. I mean, the one thing I would say is, and this has been a debate which has played out actually on Sky since including on the election night itself, with the US election. The big question is, where are you going to go? Because, again, as pointed out, the Prime Minister's using language quite reminiscent of Donald Trump, Trumpian, as John said. But at the same time, has kind of said we're going to make a big deal about building relations with the EU, and there's kind of talk about, could there still be a trade deal with the US? They're going to get pulled and pushed there now because you're going to have, Trump is a deal maker, and so he probably might be up for it, but he's going to want something for it. And clearly don't want to upset him because we've seen the pains that some of the cabinet have been on when they've been on your show about their past comments to make sure it's clear that.
I mean, I guess it is kind of decision time slightly, right? Because if you do go down the sort of Trump trade deal route, then he's going to want lower standards, for example, on chlorinated chicken or whatever it is, or you tag closer to Europe and perhaps lessen that relationship with America. I mean, it's difficult.
I don't think it's either or, and look, we haven't had to make that clear decision in the past, and it is about resetting those relationships with Europe from a
haven't made them in the past. It's been part of the EU, so it wasn't.
Well, look, I mean, since we left the EU, unfortunately, the relationships haven't been there because. For some reason, the former the administration didn't think that was important, and we clearly recognise how important that is, which is why Keir Starmer has been, out meeting European leaders a lot since the election. So it is really important we do reset those relationships for the economy, but that can apply to the United States as well, which is why we've got that strong diplomatic relationship forming with Donald Trump and his team as well when it comes into place.
Great to have you both on the programme. Lots more from both of you coming up. You're watching the Politics Hub. Still to come. As a Sky News investigation uncovers a culture of harassment and sexual misconduct in the ambulance service, one senior ambulance boss apologises to staff and patients. And Kevin Badenoch makes hay from anger among farmers over changes to inheritance tax ahead of a protest planned next week.
That has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides. It's moving this way.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
This is going to be the biggest party Tripoli has ever seen.
That's it. It got us then. There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits coming in still. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all. A lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at her arms. I can put my entire hand round.
This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients. Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Mother Nature can be vicious, absolutely savage.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa!
Close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle. Why only in America? People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Hello, welcome back. Well, it's not reached omnishambles levels, but there is some disquiet over changes to inheritance tax in the Chancellor's budget. Farmers are set to march on Parliament next week to oppose plans to scrap existing exemptions for farms worth over £1 million, while Labour insists the changes will affect a tiny proportion of farms. And the Welsh First Minister today begged rural communities to just all calm down a bit until we're clear about how many farms will be affected. The Department for Rural Affairs did, it's reported, ask the Treasury to soften the impact of the changes, maybe by exempting some older farmers, but that was rejected by the Treasury. The Farming Minister was pressed on the proposals in Parliament today.
How many thousand farmers is it going to take to clog up Parliament Square next Tuesday before the government realises that its inheritance tax policy is very deeply flawed?
I would once again direct the honourable gentleman back to the figures from the Treasury which show the numbers affected are under 500. That is the answer to his question.
Well, the Conservative opposition has latched onto this issue, and today Kemi Badenoch, in one of her first major visits since becoming leader, met with farmers to discuss their concerns. Joining her was the Shadow Environment Secretary, Victoria Atkins.
I think every farmer who is coming to Westminster next week, leaving their farms from all over the country to come here to try and get Labour ministers to listen to them, they will want to be constructive and to work with Londoners this week. The police and the farmers organising this have been working really well together, and I think we're going to see the strength of worry and feeling from our farming community and everybody who cares about our countryside, but we're going to do that in a peaceful way.
Well, let's get the thoughts of James and Mike, shall we? It feels to me that, some people are saying, look, this is really a very fair policy. Some people are using it as a tax dodge. Others are saying that actually, look, this is going to cripple family farms. Where do you stand on it, James?
Well, I spent a couple of years at DEFRA when Michael Gove was there, and I think number one, farmers have a huge role. So they spread way beyond their own communities in farming shops and so on in the way of life. That's one thing. But on an observation on a comms thing, on the actual inheritance and the fact that some people, kind of use it to pass on money without paying. That's true. But none of the groundwork was laid beforehand. And I think that's why we've seen this trail of 2 weeks from the budget, that actually some of the explanation about why this change was made is coming actually kind of 10 days after the actual budget was announced. And so to me, there's certainly a bit of a comms issue. I mean, people always like to blame comms, as someone that used to do comms, and I don't think it always is, but I think in this case there was a bit of a comms issue in just kind of explaining it. I think wider is, I'd ask myself if I was in the Labour Party is this hassle, which I think people will remember in quite a few years, they won't forget, is it worth 700 million, which in the budgetary terms is not a huge amount of money.
Have you got many farms in your constituency?
There are some, and I'm actually meeting with NFU reps and going to one of the farms on Friday. And it's important that we do listen to those that may be impacted by this. But look, we've made it really clear that it is the richest estates that this is going to impact, and not the family farms. And there's billions of pounds going into the farming industry. We're also looking at obviously bringing down energy bills for farms and ensuring that they can tap in to the grid. And we're also looking at making sure that 50% of the food that prisons, hospitals and military bases purchase come from British farms. So there's also a lot we're doing for farms, and obviously, that needs to cut through too, and that could be the comms issue that you're talking about.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? Labour, there's a few more Labour MPs with rural constituencies as well after the election, right? Much more than previously as well. It's funny, isn't it? Because there's a balance. Talk about the comms thing in budgets, isn't there, between trailing things, getting the bad news out early so you can manage the story in the day, and really winding up the Speaker. He's already told Labour off for not saying enough on the day. Would you just ignore him then, James?
I was going to make that point, actually. if we push too much out before budget, we'll end up getting our hands stung consistently by the Speaker. So it is important that we're not upsetting.
It's true. I mean, and even I wouldn't want to upset Lindsay. But I think on this one, I do think the groundwork could have been laid more. And I get it that it's a balance, and there was a lot of things to do, and I think they did do that with kind of NI, so businesses knew it was coming, as difficult as that was. To a degree. But I just think on this, the fact you're explaining it 10 days later, to me, having done comms, that tells me that hasn't been done properly.
Do you think it's a good issue for Kevin Bajor to latch onto as a new leader?
He gets to put a barber jacket on.
I think it's
it's fantastic for him.
Get the wellies on.
Right.
I mean, if I was the Conservative Party, I'd be all over this. Let's be honest, to a degree, the Conservatives lost farmers. Labour were courting farmers in the run-up to the last election for a reason. This gives them a huge issue to go back to the farming community. Those rural constituencies are places that they would expect to win votes in the future, so they should be all over this. And I still think I've listened to kind of Labour commentators, who still think there could be some kind of movement on this, and why you've got that view, that in itself is a problem.
Interesting. Thanks both very much indeed. Coming up next on the Politics Hub. Well, as we've been discussing, farmers are preparing to march on Westminster next week in protest over inheritance tax changes. From the poll tax to fox hunting, protests are a very noble British tradition, but do they actually change anything? Rampant abuse and harassment. A Sky News investigation uncovers a toxic culture in the ambulance service. Hello, welcome back. You're watching the Politics Hub. Well, a senior ambulance boss has told Sky News he wants to see more paramedics sacked for sexual harassment. It's after our investigation found a rampant harassment and abuse in the service. Well, in an exclusive interview, Jason Killens, the head of the Welsh Ambulance Service, apologised to victims while insisting that abusers are in the minority. It's as new exclusive data shows 1 in 5 of the sexual misconduct complaints made about paramedics to their regulator last year were for harassment against patients and members of the public. A warning, this report from Sky's Rachel Venables contains descriptions of sexual assault that some viewers may find distressing.
Emergency ambulance, is the patient breathing?
They're the people we call for help when we need it most. But after a year-long Sky News investigation exposing sexual misconduct in the ambulance service, another woman is ready to tell her story. A former call handler who says she was relentlessly harassed by a manager.
I'd turn up and he'd be in the doorway smirking and grab my bottom as I walked past or say things like, "You look sexy." Then the messages started. There were photos of his private parts, a whole manner of very descriptive sexual actions that he said he wanted to do with me.
She says she showed the messages to management, but they suggested moving her to another office. So she eventually quit, but claims he's still in the job today. Now, for the first time all year, an ambulance chief executive has sat down for an interview with us.
It's just not right. We shouldn't have anyone having to leave their workplace because they don't feel safe. We've failed those individuals. I'm determined to make all of our workplaces safe for all of our people. We have seen more cases, historical cases, come forward. I expect we'll see a steady increase over the next year or so as a result of the work we're doing.
You keep using the word historical, but I have to tell you that this is happening right now. You have female paramedics right now being assaulted or harassed. Do you want to see more people being rooted out, being kicked out of the service?
I do.
Paramedics are regulated by the Health and Care Professions Council. Exclusive data seen by Sky News shows that while paramedics make up just 11% of the register, they represented 64% of all investigations into sexual harassment against colleagues. Concerningly, 1 in 5 of all sexual misconduct cases against paramedics involved patients or members of the public.
This is the ambulance I was in.
For Lucy, her place of safety became a crime scene. Several years ago, her drink was spiked on a night out, but the paramedic who took her to hospital was seen assaulting her.
I was strapped down, lying here. The paramedic was sat at the foot of the bed. He put my legs up, so my knees were up, and put his hand inside my groin area, possibly touching my vagina. I don't recall any of it because I was unresponsive. And it was just a shock to think someone in that position would do that, when you think they're there to look after you.
The paramedic denied it and was found not guilty at trial, but the HCPC have a lower standard of proof than the criminal courts and struck him off. A spokesperson for NHS England said any abuse or violence directed at NHS staff is totally unacceptable and will not be tolerated. And the NHS is committed to tackling unwanted, inappropriate or harmful sexual behaviour in the workplace. We've recently introduced new national guidance and training that will help staff recognise, report and act on sexual misconduct at work to stamp out this awful behaviour. This service exists to save lives, but for those paramedics and patients who've suffered sexual abuse, harassment and cover-up, these sirens will never be a sound of safety, no matter how hard the leaders fight to fix this culture. Rachel Venables, Sky News.
A reminder that if you've been affected by the issues raised in this story, help is available from the Samaritans 24 hours a day. You can call 116 123, that's 116 123, or email jo@samaritans.org. Well, we did get some reaction to that report from the government earlier today. Here's what the Work and Pensions Minister, Emma Reynolds, told us.
Any abuse we have zero tolerance of. We've got to listen to the victims. NHS England has made clear that they're going to look into these allegations. We will not tolerate sexual abuse or abuse of any kind. And so this has to be rooted out, and we've got to listen to victims.
And talk again to James and Mike. I find it quite shocking, actually, watching that report, again, it's like, you can put your faith, your trust in people, and then to have it abused in that way.
Yeah, I think you're vulnerable if you're going in the back of an ambulance, and I do wonder whether there's something to be said around having cameras in place or having to double up in the back of an ambulance. But we know the NHS is stretched as it is, so would that work? And this is absolutely, it's very disturbing, isn't it? So it's good to see that there'll be this will be taken seriously. And more widely, I think violence against women and girls is becoming a massive issue, with 40% in convictions, 40% less convictions last year, and it taken up to 400 days for rapists or potential rapists to be charged. So there's a lot of work to be done in this area, and we're obviously taking it very seriously. Yeah,
national emergency, as Beth Cooper has described. James, what was your sort of reaction?
I saw this earlier today. I mean, this is not a party political point against the Labour voice today, because actually we've heard this over years and years about various scandals. What really frustrates me, I don't know if it does people watching at home, is when people say, well, we have zero tolerance on this, we won't tolerate this. And I'm like, well, so what are you doing differently? Because the report that we listened to just there said that the person who'd been complained about was still in the position. I mean, I'd be curious to know if they're still in the position right now. This is an investigation right now, because if the ambulance service isn't investigating that individual right now, then you can't say there's zero tolerance, because it's simply not true. And that's what we have when we have every time we hear one, and we've had things in the Metropolitan Police and other institutions, the fire brigade. There's been various institutions just this week, the Church of England, and we hear the same thing. Oh, we have zero tolerance for this. Well, you don't, because otherwise there'd have been a quicker investigation, and there'd be an investigation now. And I think, like I said, it's not genuinely not party political, because those things go over years, but we do hear the same thing every time, and I wonder if that's what frustrates people, frustrates the public.
Yeah, it is. It's a really good point. And also about the institutions as well, because look, this is not, obviously Rachel was investigating the paramedics specifically, but as you say, we've heard these allegations or similar allegations about the fire brigade, about the Met Police, about, we talked about the Church of England. What is it about the way our institutions treat vulnerable people, and also the way that good people in the organisations actually try and stamp it out or make that change?
Yeah, I'm surprised, given that being a paramedic, you're going into a very caring profession. So it's actually really shocking, and I do hope that the investigation comes through with some actions, because that's what zero tolerance is. It's actually taking action, and obviously we need to get rid of anyone who's acting in such a criminal way, and put them in prison if we can find the evidence to charge. And going forward, possibly body-worn cameras will be important for paramedics. I know a lot wear them anyway because of the threat to them. So.
Yeah, exactly. There's often a threat to paramedics as well, it should be said, too. And of course, I'm sure all of us will have so many stories about paramedics who do an amazing job, but at the same time, it's the kind of culture and institutions and the way we handle these kind of allegations as well, isn't it?
It is, and that's one of the things I think you need to look at. When we looked at the statistics there, the overrepresentation of paramedics, to me, if you see such a distortion of the statistics, and it's one statistic, and we haven't looked into it, but initially to me that would suggest a cultural problem. Why are you so overrepresented? So and again, it goes back to the zero tolerance thing. What's the investigation going to be? How is someone going to take a proper look at that and say, is something wider going on here? Is there real process going on here? Do people have somewhere to go to? Because clearly the lady we heard to on the film didn't feel that, so there's a problem.
Yeah, thanks both very much. Really interesting and important thing to speak about this evening. Still to come on the Politics Hub. Well, as farmers fire up their Massey Fergusons and prepare to descend on Westminster next week to protest changes to inheritance tax, we're looking back at some of the great parliamentary protests through the ages and asking, do they ever work?
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8 o'clock, we have a special report on sexual abuse within the ambulance service. Plus, why there are calls for the sale of fireworks to members of the public to be banned. Plus, we'll be meeting the AI granny, who is the new weapon in the fight against phone scammers. All that and much more on the UK Tonight at 8.
I'm David Blevins. and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent.
It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century.
I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirmed that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Now, we were talking earlier on the show about the farmers' protests planned over the coming days here in Westminster. They want to try and force the government to backtrack on changes to inheritance tax. But does trade protest ever really work? We'll discuss that in a moment, but first we're going to have a look back at some of the great parliamentary protests of recent history.
Breaking rocks in a hot sun. I fought for law and the law won. I fought for law and the law won. I needed money 'cause I had none. I fought for law and the law won. I fought for law and the law won. I left my baby and it feels so bad. I guess my race is run. She's the best girl that I ever had. I fought for law and the law won. I fought for law and
Great soundtrack to that video, you have to say. Let's chat again to James and Mike. So what do you reckon? Do protests work?
They can work, but it can also work either way. You look at the annoyance that people formed around the Just Stop Oil protests, and actually I think that did cause no good at all. Because firstly they put lives at risk, and they annoyed people trying to get from A to B. So there's a way to protest that I think can potentially have an impact, but often it attracts the same people who are almost professional protesters. So I think if you conduct yourself in the right manner, then it combined with other methods of pressure, it can have some impact.
What do you reckon?
I mean, the one we did see there was the poll tax, which
Yeah.
I was very young then, I'd hasten to add. But, that did obviously have an effect. And a lot of the time, I really agree with Mike. I mean, I think you've got to think about your cause. I worked at DEFRA. I think the environment's a crucial issue. And I actually think that people like Just Stop Oil have set that back. And I don't think they bring anyone on board. I think they're just talking to people that already support them. And that's probably the biggest thing is, are you basically just appealing to people that already agree with you? Or are you changing anyone's mind with the demonstration? I think perhaps it's when they're an expression of something. I think two big protests, poll tax being one, but the other one was around the police violence when I can't remember the place in London where it took place, but that was an expression of feeling. And I think when you have an expression of feeling, that taps into something wider, and that's when you can have an impact and raise an issue, which that did.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? It's interesting about the idea of driving immediate political change, but then also just showing that as a nation you're not happy with something. When I'm thinking about like the Iraq War, for example, you didn't exactly change government policy, but at the same time, maybe it did show that the views of so many people in the UK at the time and had a worth because of that. Yeah, absolutely. But I think if a protest to be effective, it has to be combined with other methods as well. You know, be it engaging with your MPs, petitions, media. You know what you're letting yourself in for here. You sure you want to do that? I genuinely welcome our democratic right to protest, but it has to be done in the right way. Always has to be peaceful, of course, and not too disruptive, particularly in London, where people already find it difficult to get around on the road sometimes. So. Can you tell the badger story?
So I did mention this earlier. So when I was at DEFRA, obviously we had the badger collars, very contentious issue, and so we had a badger that was stationed right outside DEFRA. That when we would walk out with Michael Gove, the Secretary of State, you know, they were supposed to kind of protest. And anyway, after a while, like, Michael used to kind of ask them, you know, are you thirsty? Do you need some water? They'd say hi to each other. And then one day we came and it was a different badger, and I was told that the protesting badger was removed because it was too friendly with Michael. So that was a protest that didn't work.
I love that, the actual badger, because it struck. That's a classic Michael Gove as well, like just really trying to get in with the badger. Yeah. You can imagine like the kind of being overly polite and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely great. Any sort of particular... neither of you have been on protest, have you? I've always looked towards being a politician rather than a protester, which is actually pretty much the same as where the Labour Party is now. You know, under Corbyn, it was very protesty and you know, not helpful, I think, for politics. But we take a different route. Anything you would protest for? Well, I'm a politician, so there you go, absolutely not. No.
If there was one against VAR, in football, I'd go on that protest.
Would you?
Yeah.
One against VAR.
That's
I think I'm with you, actually. It does mean that you know, no one ever gets to celebrate a goal at the right time.
Exactly.
It takes the joy out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think maybe as someone who's been trying to get Glastonbury tickets to go, the queuing system also didn't work with Oasis tickets, so I think that is something that I would get out and the online.
There we go.
Queue.
We've got our course.
Too much queuing.
I think when you start to see sort of not the professional protesters out on the street, that's when you should take it more seriously.
Yeah, first-time protesters.
That's it. Yeah.
You know, it's mad. Thank you both very much indeed. Great to have you on the Hub this evening. That's it from us tonight, but I'll see you on Monday at 7. Up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane Me. I'll see you on Monday, and in the meantime, have a great weekend.